Well, let's cross now to Washington, D.C. and speak with Cameron Hudson, a senior associate at the CSIS Africa Program. Welcome to the program there, Cameron. We heard there from Khaled saying that might be a role for potential mediators. We did hear earlier from Secretary of State Antony Blinken, but it seems that regional players might have a more relevant approach here, including neighbouring Egypt, who's always been wary about seeing political instability or political change in neighbouring Sudan. What's your view? How can this situation be mediated? Who might be involved?
Well, I actually think it's going to be not the neighbors, but a kind of farther afield group. The neighbors right now, Egypt in particular, seems to have taken an active role in this conflict. There's conflicting reports about what that might be, whether they're actually operational on the ground or providing technical and intelligence support to the military, to the SAF. But I think it's fair to say that the longer this drags on, I think the more likely it is that neighbors get dragged into this conflict. And I think that they're going to be maybe perhaps too close to the action to be seen as mediators. We know, for example, that Salva Kiir has written a letter to General Burhan just in the last week, pushing him to make sure that he did not make concessions without first talking to the signatories of the Juba peace agreement. So again, we're seeing the neighbors already sort of take some sides and show where their interests lie. So I think we're looking at countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. Obviously, Washington is continuing to play a diplomatic role in this to try to create pressure. As well, the UN is supposed to be meeting today, the Security Council. We will see if a new kind of diplomatic push comes out of that. But I think that the tripartite process that had been leading the talks inside the country has clearly not worked, and it's going to need a kind of diplomatic push from the outside to restore relations. But at this point, I think it's very unlikely to see a mediated settlement to the fighting right now, at least not until there's some kind of significant battlefield gains. And even when that happens, I think the position on the battlefield will dictate the terms of whatever negotiation we might envision.
Yes, and it's clear that Hemedti's RSF has grown into quite a significant force. The Hemedti is essentially the second ruler in charge, as he's the deputy on that ruling council under the army chief Al-burhan. If it is essentially a battle of the two groups, is there any way to tell which side might prevail in terms of the capabilities of either the army or the RSF?
Well, again, right now it's really difficult to ascertain who has the advantage, simply because of the amount of kind of disinformation that both sides are pumping out into the social media space and on state television. So it's difficult to determine the veracity of any of these statements. But what I would say is that these are very different armies in terms of their composition and of their attributes. The Sudan Armed Forces, the National Army, is a much heavier army, more heavy equipment. They have an air force. I think that they have less mobility. They're less nimble, but they have more of an ability through their artillery and their tanks to secure fixed locations. The RSF, on the other hand, is a much more nimble, light infantry type of army that is highly mobile, can strike and fall back. So they're very separately matched, I think, in this combat. What I would say is that the RSF has less experience in urban warfare. They cut their teeth really and gained their experience in kind of open desert fighting that we have seen in Darfur and in the peripheral areas. Most of their recruits are from these rural areas of Sudan, so they're not necessarily urban dwellers. They don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the streets of Khartoum and Omdurman. So I think that in the cities, the SAF likely has an advantage because they know the cities. They have been garrisoned in the cities. But again, they are a less mobile force. So it'll be very interesting to see how these forces stack up. But again, it's difficult to know right now because of the amount of disinformation both sides are putting out there.
Okay, Cameron Hudson, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us here on TRT World.